Give me that the first question will have a lot of context in it for agriculture.
Sure.
Losses are driving farmers to desperation.
Yeah.
Some farmers already taking their own lives. In Davos, you said you would only step down as Agri Secretary if you've ticked off items in your bucket list. My question is, what is in that list? And what will you specifically do to implement for farmers to feel a change in their lives today, in the short and medium term?
As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up because it's we always have been talking about production, non-importation, etc. And we have to always remind ourselves that what we are really talking about is the livelihood of the farmers as well, not only the supply of food, but of the pricing of food, but also the livelihood of farmers and the future of farmers. I mean, I think it's a much quoted statistic that in the Philippines the average farmer is 57, 58 years old, and the young people are not that interested to enter into farming. So there are all of these multifaceted problems that we face in terms of agriculture. So again, in the short term, the increasing prices of food products is alarming, and that's why we now have to, whatever we do, we must import. I think my sentiments about importation are clear, but it is an emergency situation that has been brought about by neglect of the agricultural sector for many, many years. And therefore, our production is well below our demand. Therefore, we must import. So, because of the chaos that we saw within question when it came to sugar, when it came to the onions, we did not know how much of the commodity was actually in the country. We're starting to get a handle on it now, and so we are going to put in terms of sugar. I mentioned specifically before that we will from now on maintain a 2-month buffer stock. That is to mitigate the speculation. Alam mo, normal yan sa negosyante. Pag alam nila magkaka-shortage, they will keep it hanggang tumaas yung presyo. Maybe you can call that hoarding, but it's a business practice. And that's what we hope to avoid. In terms of onions naman, ganun pa rin ang sitwasyon. We are not producing as much as we consume, and therefore we still have to import. But the schedule of importation, both of sugar and onion, all of the other commodities, the schedule is very, very important. It's not just a question of one lump importation at the beginning of the year. It has to come in at the proper time. So you're not competing with local farmers. So that's a very simple first step. Pag maayos na yan, that is one box that I've been able to tick. Now but we come back to the problem of production. So that again, we still have to put into place. Once I know that the value chain has already been put together, never mind that it is functioning yet, but we already know what needs to be done in each part of that value chain, and we have the means and we have a plan. Then we will have a secretary who will then take my place and will implement that plan. Basta alam natin yung nakakaintindi doon sa ating ginagawa. So those are the essential elements that I'm talking about. There's some reorganization that needs to be done in the Department of Agriculture for the simple reason that we are doing different things from what we were doing before. And so you have to restructure the bureaucracy in like fashion.
I wanted to ask, you said you have a bucket list that needs to be ticked off. Would you share some? I mean,
well, that's it.
That's it.
That's basically it. I mean, within that subject matter, hindi lang yan. I mean, if you go into detail, there are still very many things that we need to do. In terms of production, we have to help the farmers. We have to we are trying to adopt new techniques for farming that we will be able to use new technology, new varieties. Start with the R&D. All that of and especially in the area of agriculture, the overarching issue is climate change. We're having a very tough time scheduling these things because the weather keeps changing. And that one of the reason I've also made contact with several other countries and my counterparts in several countries is that we are trying to develop what we refer to as non-traditional suppliers. And because of the price of fertilizer, the lack of export of wheat, rice, of course, is another thing that we import. Corn, we were going to have to import. But with the shocks that have hit the global economy and with the supply chain problems that we see everywhere, then that is something that we have to work around. And the way to do it is to have many sources of supply so that whatever happens, we have somewhere to go. Hopefully down the road, in a few years, we no longer have to worry about non-traditional supply because we will be able to produce enough for ourselves.
Mr. President, about the Maharlika Wealth Fund, Congressman Joey Salceda talked about a re-engineered fund. And I wanted to ask you, he said he described it as the securitization of 44 billion pesos, and it will be listed in the stock market. You have lawmakers, opposition lawmakers, who say that under the law, 50% of the income of GOCCs have to be remitted to the National Treasury, and you use it for the budget. So along with that, how could you ensure that the fund won't be used for money laundering, given you will be accepting private funding?
Let's do two in one there.
Yes.
We'll do the first one first. First of all, the idea of using the GOCCs to put value into the Maharlika Fund was broached in Davos. And it was brought up. I don't know why it's made its news here immediately to the Philippines, and people are very concerned about it. I watched your interview with Congressman Edsel Legman this morning, and I have heard the comments that Congressman Joey Salceda has made, and his concerns that he had aired. I agree with him. You cannot use funds of the GOCC. Pera ng gobyerno, what will the government spend? It was a proposal. It's not something that we have adopted. The GOCCs, there are several problems because I remember we had a little meeting, lasted about 15 minutes, and that was proposed. But after the meeting, I pulled Secretary Ben Jokno aside, and we said, what do you think? Sabi niya, hindi yata pwede. And I said, it's too disruptive. Think, every single GOCC has its own charter. How will you will then revise all of those charters to align with the Maharlika Fund? That's not the purpose of the GOCC, number one. Number two, this is a lot of income that goes to the national government that will suddenly disappear. So that will be it will not disappear. It will go into the Maharlika Fund and cannot be used for the budget of the national government. And we have many things that we would like to appropriate in the coming years, and we will need those funds. So I don't think that's a viable proposition, at least not for us. I've seen, I know that there are other sovereign wealth funds that did it that way, but it's parang hindi bagay sa atin yun eh. Kaya we are a little lukewarm about that idea. The worry about the fund being used as a money laundering device implies that private monies will be put into the fund. But yes, private monies will be involved with the fund, but it's not a savings account that you just put it there and it stays there. No, what will happen is the Maharlika Fund will serve as the seed fund for the sovereign wealth fund, and the 40 billion, 30 billion, 40 billion, whatever it may come to at that point, is going to serve as a seed money for the fund. Now, whenever we come into partnership, we do a G2G with Japan, for example, or we do a PPP with some big outfit. Then, it is only the time that the monies come into the fund to be used for the program. Hindi yun basta o sige, bigyan niyo ako ng ilang bilyon dolyar, tapos lalagay lang yun, akong bahala na dyan. It's not like that at all. And in fact, even on our end, we will only deploy funds when there is a very specific project to be paid for. So, money laundering just won't come into it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Karen Davila of
Thank you, sir.
ABS-CBN. Next, we have Ms. Cheryl Cosm of TV5.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I'm Cheryl Cosim representing TV5. And sama ko na rin po yung 1PH and 1 News. So, ibig sabihin ba nun, 6 questions pwede? I'm just...
Galing negotiator.
Okay, my first question concerns the positions in your administration. First, just a little over a month ago, you granted former PMS Chief Naida Angping's leave after she asked for personal time for herself and her family. What made you appoint her as ambassador to France, considering she never held any diplomatic post before this? And who will replace her?
Well, I need to use this? Very
Sir,
good. Okay,
okay.
well, the situation with then Secretary Naida Angpin was that it was a personal decision on her part. She had some personal issues that she had to work through, and she said, I cannot do my work while I'm having to go through this, and that's why I need to go and think about it. And she came back and she said, maybe I can just find something that will not that I will be able to handle. And I said, what do you think? And she said, if you could appoint me to a diplomatic position. She has not held formally a diplomatic position, but she has been working with the Foreign Service for years and years and years. Tao yan ng Uncle Kokoy ko. And she worked in the American Embassy, the Philippine Embassy in the United States. She worked in China. She worked in all of the areas that we were slowly opening up. So sanay siya sa trabahong yan. And she has said that she had for years now been working on her Foreign Service exam. So I think that's what she's going to plan to do now. Yun talagang gusto niyang gawin since before. So now we'll formalize her wishes. So, but again, the reasons for it are personal. So I don't think it's my place to talk about that. It is her choice.
Okay. Like what I've said, positions in your administration. Isa pa lang, sir. Pero ito na, pahabol doon sa first. Okay. About Erwin Tulfo, it was reported that you're gonna appoint him as one of your presidential advisors. If so, on what?
No, that's really not been part of the plan for Erwin. No, we had other plans for him. Not as a presidential advisor.
But he would still be part of your administration.
I hope so. I hope so. Because whatever we say, difficulties that he faced with the Committee on Appointments and the CA, the time that he was running the DSWD, he did a very good job. So we can't lose that kind of asset. So we'll find something that he can do, so we can take advantage of his good instincts when it comes to social service.
Mr. President, still another position in your administration. May mga comments po ang mga senador na mag-appoint na po kayo ng secretary po sa DA and other groups para daw po mas matutukan ang ahensya. Your comment on that?
For me, there really are things that I can do that if there was a secretary and he or she did it, hindi magagawa pero matagal, madaming diskusyon, and you'll have to come up. Well, the president, they cannot say no to. And pag hindi nila ginawa yung utos ko, pwede ko sitahin. Yung secretary, pwede, alam mo na, it can still be may pakiusap pa. And so that's what I bring to the position, is that when I make a decision, I say, this is what we need to do, this is the plan, every one of you follow this plan. You do this, you do that, magtatasking tayo. Kailangan masunod yun. And if not, then I have, I can chastise them, I can move them aside, push them into other positions, etc., etc., etc. But generally speaking, if the president asks you to do something, they'll do it. If somebody else will do it, they may do it, they probably do it, but they may not. So we want to take that wiggle room out of that system.
And this is my second question, Mr. President.
Second question.
Just a few weeks after your visit to China, Chinese Coast Guard drove away Filipino fishing boats in Ayungin Shoal. What message does this give you? And what happened to President Xi Jinping's promise for a compromise?
Well, we haven't come to that compromise yet. And if the timing of what we refer to as shadowing, is what they do, is they shadow our fishing boats. And so that incident happened right after I had returned from China. So we have immediately used that thing, that mechanism that I talked about. We can even immediately contact the Chinese government, and hopefully, though our counterparts on the other side can bring to President Xi's attention this problem, and we have done that. But that does not preclude us from continuing to make protests and continuing to send note verbals concerning this. But this is a long process because it is something new. I just hope we can come to some kind of arrangement, because I cannot see the utility for the Chinese of doing that. These fishing boats are not armed. They don't pose a threat to anyone. So I think that is something that we can achieve in the near term.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank